The morning it happened, I was making biscuits, not the kind from a tube, the kind my mother taught me. Flour pressed between cold fingers, folded twice, patted flat. I had made them every Sunday for 41 years, in that kitchen, at that counter, beside the window, where the light came in gold and slow and without asking permission. My daughter-in-law walked in and turned off the oven. She did not say, "Excuse me." She did not look at me first. She simply reached past my shoulder, twisted the knob to off, and set a paper grocery bag on the counter where my dough was resting. Then she turned and said, clear as a school bell, that she would be doing the cooking from now on, that the kitchen was hers to manage, that if I wanted something to eat, I was welcome to ask. I stood there with flour on my hands and looked at her. Her name was Brianna. She was 34 years old, had moved into my house in Savannah, Georgia, 26 months ago, with my son Marcus and their 2 suitcases, and a very confident attitude about temporary arrangements. She had never once paid a utility bill. She had never once asked how my knees were doing, but she had, in those 26 months, rearranged my cabinets, replaced my dish towels with ones she preferred, and now stood in front of my oven, with her arms crossed, like someone who had just made a reasonable business decision. I looked past her to the doorway. Marcus was there, leaning against the frame with his coffee, watching. His eyes met mine for exactly 1 second before he looked at his phone. I did not say anything. I wiped my hands on my apron. I wrapped the dough carefully in the cloth I had used since before Marcus was born. I set it in the refrigerator without a word, and I walked upstairs to my room and sat on the edge of my bed and placed both hands flat on my knees. I had allowed it. Not because I was weak. I want to be honest about that. I allowed it because I confused love with permission, and I had been paying for that confusion for 2 years. I thought patience was a kindness. I thought softening the sharp edges of things kept everyone safer. What I had actually done was train 2 people to believe that my house had no owner. I sat there in the quiet and let myself see it clearly, maybe for the first time. I spent 31 years as a loan officer at Coastal Heritage Bank. I reviewed thousands of applications. I knew what financial desperation looked like when it dressed itself up in confidence. I knew what it sounded like when someone explained away numbers they could not afford. Marcus had lost his position at the logistics company 14 months ago. He had told me the job market was slow, that something better was coming. He said it the way Brianna spoke about the kitchen, with certainty, borrowed from somewhere else. I reached into the drawer of my bedside table and pulled out a small leather notebook. Inside it, dates and amounts, things I had recorded quietly the way a loan officer records things. Money I had transferred when Marcus said the car insurance lapsed. The electric bill I covered in November when their account came up short. The grocery runs I had not been asked about but simply noticed and paid. Numbers do not forget, even when everyone in the house pretends they do not exist. I did not go back downstairs that evening. I was not upset in the way that shakes you. I was still in the way that moves you. That night, I made a phone call to my youngest sister, Claudette, who lived 40 minutes away and had been telling me for a year that I needed to stop letting comfort become someone else's entitlement. She answered on the second ring. "You finally called," she said, before I could say a word. I told her what happened. All of it. Not just the oven. The cabinet reorganization and the dish towels and the way Brianna had started answering the door to my house as though she were the one who bought it. The way Marcus had stopped looking at me directly when Brianna was in the room. Claudette was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Dorothy, the house is still yours, isn't it?" It was not a question. She knew it was. Our mother had left it to me in a will so precise it could have survived a courtroom. No joint ownership, no addendums, just my name, recorded clean. "Then act like it," Claudette said. I slept better that night than I had in months. Monday morning, while Brianna was at her part-time job and Marcus was out doing whatever Marcus did with his days now. I drove downtown to a small office above a dry cleaning shop on Bull Street. The name on the door said Patricia Okafor, attorney at law. We had gone to the same church for 11 years. She was precise, unhurried, and did not believe in unnecessary conversation. She listened to everything without interrupting. When I finished, she folded her hands on the desk and said, "Occupants by permission. No lease, no tenancy agreement, no legal standing beyond what you have given them voluntarily. You can withdraw that permission. It must be done properly and in writing. 30 days' notice. Served correctly." I nodded. I had already suspected as much. She looked at me with an expression I recognized from the mirror. The look of a woman who has done the math. "And the financial accounts?" she asked. "Anything joint?" I told her about the supplementary card I had added to my account 2 years ago when Marcus said it was easier for household expenses. I had not looked at the statements closely enough. I had trusted that household meant shared, not personal. Patricia picked up her pen. "Let me ask you something first," she said. "Before we proceed, do you want to look at the full account history?" I said yes. She had a colleague who handled forensic accounting. Within 48 hours, I had a summary on paper that made the kitchen feel like a very small beginning. I sat in Patricia's office and read down the columns slowly. Marcus had been using the card for things that had nothing to do with this household. Subscription services in his name only. Restaurant charges on nights he had told me he was job hunting. A payment to a financial platform I did not recognize. Transfer after transfer to an account I had never seen. Brianna's name on a charge at a jewelry store in March. The card had been used as a personal account for over a year, and I had been funding it the way water funds a leak, quietly, invisibly, without being asked. I set the papers down on the edge of the desk. "I am not going to cry," I told Patricia. "I know," she said. "I want it stopped. All of it." She nodded once. "Then, we are going to do this in the right order." The first thing I did when I left her office was drive to the bank. I did not call ahead. I walked in and sat with the branch manager, a woman named Sandra who had processed my accounts for 6 years. I explained what I needed. Sandra pulled up the records without blinking. The supplementary card was closed before I left the parking lot. The primary account was restructured. New alerts, new pins, everything that had my name on it, and Brianna and Marcus's hands in it, was sealed off like a room after a flood. I drove home and made dinner for one. Pork chop, green beans, rice. I ate it at the kitchen table without rushing, and watched the evening come in through the window I had looked out of for decades. When Marcus came home, he opened the refrigerator and asked what happened to the card. His voice was careful, not angry yet. Confused the way people are when the math stops working before they understand why. "I'm restructuring my finances," I said. I did not look up from my plate. He stood in the kitchen doorway. "What does that mean?" "It means the card is closed." I set my fork down. "You are welcome to open your own." He started to say something, stopped, then said quietly that Brianna had a charge that went through tonight for her gym membership, and it had been declined. I looked at him then, slowly, the way I used to look at loan applicants who had confused optimism with documentation. "Marcus," I said, "when did you last have a job?" He looked at the floor. "How much do you have saved right now?" "In your own account. In your name." He said nothing. That silence answered more than words could. I picked up my fork again. "Dinner is done. I'll leave a plate in the refrigerator if Brianna hasn't eaten." He left the room without another word. I washed my dish, dried it, and set it back in the cabinet where it belonged. 2 days later, Patricia's associate came to the house on a Tuesday morning. I was not home. I was having breakfast with Claudette at a cafe on the river, the kind of morning that smelled like coffee and low tide, and a life that was still mine to decide things in. My phone lit up with Marcus's name. I let it ring. Then again. I picked up on the third call. Mom. His voice was lower now, flattened. There is a man here with papers. Is Brianna there? Yes. She's upset. Tell her to read the papers before she raises her voice about them. There was a muffled sound. Brianna in the background, sharp and incredulous. Then Marcus again, quieter. Mom, it says we have 30 days. That's correct. You can't do this. I looked out at the water. A pelican sat perfectly still on a post near the dock. It is the house I allowed you to stay in, I said. That allowance has ended. He went quiet. I heard the sound of paper, the rustle of legal language meeting a morning that had started ordinary. What did we do? He asked finally. His voice cracked, just slightly, at the edge of the question. I thought about the oven. I thought about the flour on my hands and the look he gave me before he looked at his phone. I thought about 31 years of reading people across a desk and knowing which ones had never planned to repay anything. I think you know, I said gently. I ended the call and ordered more coffee. What happened next I did not see but heard in pieces over the following days. Brianna drove to the bank that afternoon. She tried to access an account she had been listed as a contact on, not a co-owner, a distinction that matters enormously and that she apparently had not read carefully. She was turned away. Marcus called 4 times between Tuesday and Thursday. I answered once and said only that I was available to talk when the volume in the conversation was lower. Brianna called Claudette, which surprised even me. Claudette called me afterward and said, she wanted me to talk some sense into you. I told her you were already the most sensible person I know. She said you were throwing them out on the street. I told her you were giving them 30 days and that most landlords wouldn't give them 30 minutes. I thanked Claudette and asked if she wanted to come for dinner Sunday. She said she would bring sweet potato pie. On Friday morning, Patricia called. Dorothy, she said, I need you to know something before you hear it elsewhere. A financial account application was submitted recently in your name. Checking and credit. Not by you. I sat down slowly. She gave me the details. Brianna had applied, using my social security number and my address, for a new account at a different institution. She had listed herself as a joint owner. The application had been flagged by the bank's fraud detection before it processed. Patricia had already contacted the necessary parties. A report had been filed. I held the phone and looked at the wall of my living room, the one with the framed photo of Savannah in winter, gray and Spanish moss and dignified. How long has she been trying to do this? I asked. The application was recent, Patricia said. But the information she had was detailed. She had your account numbers from the card access. She knew your mother's maiden name. This was not a small decision. I closed my eyes for a moment. She was not just living in my house. She was trying to anchor herself to me legally, financially, without my knowledge or consent. A co-owner on a bank account. A name attached to my credit. She had watched how I worked, how I trusted, how I handed things over when people said it was for household convenience. And she had decided to use it. I felt something harden in my chest, not with anger, but with clarity. File everything, I told Patricia. Every piece of it. There was a meeting 2 weeks after the notice was served. Patricia had arranged a formal conference. A mediator. Documentation on both sides. A room that was not anyone's kitchen or living room, where every statement would be recorded and every number would be required to show itself. I arrived early. I chose the seat at the far end of the table, facing the door, the way I had sat at my desk at the bank for 3 decades. From there, I could see faces before people arranged them. Patricia sat beside me with her folders exact and parallel. In front of me, I placed 3 things. My identification. The door opened at exactly 10 o'clock. Marcus came in first. He looked like a man who had not slept, wearing a shirt pressed but not carefully, his jaw set in a way I recognized from when he was 15 and caught in something he could not explain. Brianna followed a half step behind, which surprised me. I had expected her to walk ahead. "Please be seated," Patricia said. Brianna sat down and immediately looked at the mediator rather than at me. She had calculated something before she arrived. She was going to be calm, reasonable, the put-upon one. I watched her settle into that performance and said nothing. Marcus glanced at me once, quickly, and then at the table. The mediator opened the session. Brianna spoke first. She said they had been contributing to the household in non-financial ways. Cooking? She said the arrangement had been mutual and that what I was doing now was retaliatory and cruel. I let her finish. Then I said, "Patricia, can we show them document 3? The bank fraud report slid across the table. Brianna's eyes dropped to it before she could stop herself. The mediator looked at it, then at Brianna. Marcus looked at it last. I watched his face read down the page. The application date, the social security number, the account numbers pulled from the supplementary card. The name listed as joint account holder, Brianna Ann Mercer. The room went quiet in a specific way, the kind of quiet that only happens when something that has been hidden is suddenly in paper, in ink, in a room where everyone is watching. "Marcus," I said softly, "I am not doing this to punish you." He did not look up. I had 31 years of reviewing documents that told the truth about people's intentions. Not all of it, but enough. Enough to know when someone was planning to leave before they said it, or stay longer than they should, or build something at another person's expense. He finally looked at me, and in his face was the expression I had been waiting 2 years to see. Not anger, not deflection. Something older and more honest than both. Shame that comes from understanding, not from being caught. "Mom," he said. His voice was almost nothing. "I know," I said. Brianna began to say something about how the application was just exploring options, how she had not meant to use my information without asking. Patricia set a second document beside the first. "This one is a timeline," she said evenly. The application was submitted 9 days after the notice of termination was served. These are not the actions of someone exploring options. These are the actions of someone attempting to create a financial foothold after a legal one was removed. The mediator asked Brianna to respond formally. She did not. I looked at my son. "I want to say something and I need you to hear all of it," I said. He nodded once. "I allowed this to go on too long. That is the truth. I opened the door, and I kept it open because I thought that was what loving you looked like. But what I actually did was let someone come in and gradually stop seeing me as a person who owned the space. I became furniture. Background: a signature and a credit score attached to a house that someone else had decided they deserved. I let that happen." He exhaled. Slow. Something deflating. "I also want you to know that I have never stopped being your mother. But I will never again let that mean someone else can use it against me." Brianna picked up her bag and stood. She said she needed a moment and walked toward the door. The mediator noted it. She did not come back into the room. Marcus stayed. He sat there after the formal part ended, after Patricia was putting her folders back in order. After the mediator had stepped out. He sat at that table in a conference room in Savannah and looked like a man who had just turned on a light in a room and did not recognize anything in it. "She told me it was practical," he said finally. "The application. She said if anything happened to you, we would need access." I nodded. I had heard that language before. In the bank. More than once. "And you believed her?" I said. I wanted to. I reached across the table and set my hand over his, briefly, the way I used to when he was small and had fallen from something he should not have climbed. "I want you to find out what else you believed because she wanted you to." He looked at me for a long time. Then he said, "Where do I start?" I told him to start by getting a bank account in only his name. Then find out what accounts currently existed with his name on them that he did not open himself. Then talk to a lawyer. Not mine. One for himself. He wrote it down on a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. The way he used to write down homework, small and careful. When he left, he held the door for Patricia. She raised an eyebrow at me as she gathered her case. "You did well," she said. "I did what I should have done sooner." She smiled without arguing. The 30 days pass the way 30 days do when you are not watching them with dread, quietly, and then all at once. I did not return to the house to watch the move. Claudette offered to come with me, and I told her no. Let the paper do the work. Let the house breathe before you walk back in. That was what Patricia had said, and it was right. I drove south instead, down to the coast where the barrier islands sit flat and salt gray and ancient. I ate lunch at a place with paper menus and ceiling fans, and fish pulled from water you could see from the window. I did not check my phone until I had finished eating. 3 messages from Patricia's associate. Methodical, clean, first. They are loading the vehicle. Then, keys handed over as agreed. Incident-free. Final. Completed. You may return. That was all. No shouting. No last-minute accusations delivered through a screen door. Just a truck backing out of a driveway, and paper doing what paper does when it is properly written. I drove home in the afternoon. The gate opened the way it always had. The front walk was quiet. A neighbor's dog barked twice from somewhere down the street, and then stopped. I put my key in the lock and felt it turn the way it had for 22 years, smooth and without resistance. Inside, the air was stale, heavier than I expected, weighted with the particular residue of people who had lived in a space too comfortably and left in a hurry. There were pale squares on the walls where they had hung things. A scuff along the baseboard in the hallway. The kitchen smelled like the candles Brianna had preferred, something tropical and synthetic that had never belonged in this house. I opened every window. Then I found a bucket. There is something that happens when you clean a space with your own hands after it has been occupied by the wrong energy for too long. It is not satisfying in a triumphant way. It is honest, just water and cleaner, and the sound of your own work, and the slow return of a room to itself. I scrubbed the kitchen counter from end to end. I wiped down every cabinet door. I moved my flour back to the shelf where it had always lived before Brianna had decided it would be more efficient on a lower shelf that she could reach more easily. I baked biscuits, not to prove anything. Because it was Sunday. Because that kitchen, and that counter, and that particular slant of afternoon light had always meant Sunday biscuits, and nothing Brianna had decided changed that. While they were in the oven, Marcus called, not frantic, not accusatory, just his voice, plain and tired. He said he was staying at a friend's place, that he had looked at the accounts like I told him, that he had found 3 things he had not known about, one of which he was still trying to understand. I told him to take his time. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I kept thinking you turned the oven off on yourself. That day, that you just walked upstairs because you were upset. It took me 3 weeks to understand that you left because you had already decided something." I looked out at the backyard. The azalea I had planted the year Marcus was born was blooming again, pink and completely indifferent to everything that had happened inside. "I left because I was done waiting for you to say something," I told him. He exhaled. "I should have." Yes, we talked a little longer. He asked if he could come by sometime. Not to move back in, just to sit. I said yes. "When you are ready, come on a Sunday. I will have biscuits." He said okay. And then he said, "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't protect you." "I know that now," I said. "Come for biscuits." The following weeks had their own rhythm. A Saturday when the painter came and I stood in the living room pointing at the wall color chart until I found the right one. A warm cream, not quite white, the color of mornings. He worked quickly. By evening, the room felt different in the way a room does when it is given back to the person it belongs to. I put my chair back by the front window, the one with the cushion worn soft from years of me sitting in it. I set the small table beside it, the one for my reading glasses and my tea. I made a pot of chamomile and sat in the new old quiet and listened to the street outside. A neighbor, Miss Georgia May, had watched all of this with the patient attention of a woman who had been watching this block for 40 years. She appeared at my door one Thursday evening with a pound cake wrapped in foil and the kind of expression that meant she had been waiting to say something for a while. She sat at my kitchen table and said, "I saw the truck leave." She paused. "I saw a lot of things over these 2 years. I told her thank you for the cake." She told me there were 2 other women on the block who had similar arrangements with their children. One with a daughter, one with a son-in-law who was no longer a son-in-law but hadn't left. They didn't know what they could do about it. "Would you talk to them?" she asked. I looked at her. "I am not a lawyer," I said. "No," she said. "But you know things they don't. And you sat in that chair again. They can see that from the street." We started small. 4 of us around my dining table, coffee and that pound cake, and the specific kind of careful listening that happens between women who know something is wrong but have not yet named it. The questions came slowly. "My son wants me to add his name to the deed. He says it makes things easier if something happens to me. My daughter says she handles the bills, and it's simpler if she's on the account. They say it's just for a few months, and then they'll find a place." I recognized all of it. I told them what I knew. Not as a lawyer, but as someone who had spent 31 years on the other side of a desk where people signed things they did not fully read. I told them that ownership is not a gesture of love. If you want to leave something to your children, you write a will, you see an attorney, you do it while you are alive and thinking clearly. You do not sign your name onto a deed while someone is standing in your kitchen explaining why it makes sense. Your house stays yours. Your money stays yours. Your name stays yours. While you are breathing, those things are not gifts. They are the foundation everything else stands on. Shoulders straightened around my table. One of them took out a notebook. 2 of them wrote down Patricia's name. We met again the following Thursday. And the one after that. A month passed. One evening, there was a soft knock at my front door. I knew the knock. Marcus stood on the porch. He was wearing a jacket I had not seen before. Something that fit him correctly. And he looked like he had been sleeping. "May I come in?" he asked. I stepped aside. He walked through the house slowly, not nervously, the way someone walks through a place they once knew when they are checking what is still the same. He stopped in the kitchen door, looked at the counter, at the shelf where the flour lived. "I have something to tell you," he said. We sat at the kitchen table. He had found through his own attorney that Brianna had opened 2 additional accounts in the time they had lived in my house. One with his name, one attempt with mine that had been caught. There was a credit card in his name he had not applied for. There were charges he could not account for. She had told him consistently that things were under control, that savings were building, that the delay in moving out was about the market and the timing and patience being the smart choice. He spread the papers on my table the way I had once spread papers in a conference room. "There was nothing there," he said. "Less than nothing." I looked at the numbers. Not to confirm what I already suspected, but to let him show me. "She spent 4 years," he said quietly, using every soft surface she could find. His voice was steady, but raw at the edges. I thought about Brianna telling me the kitchen was hers to manage. The way she had stood at my oven with her arms crossed. The confidence of someone who believed she had already won. "She miscounted the soft surfaces," I said. He looked up. "She forgot the one who owned the house." He was quiet for a long moment. Then something shifted in his face, not quite a smile. Something older and more complicated than that. The look of a person coming back to themselves. "He is working now." a project management position in a city 3 hours north that started 6 weeks after the conference room. He calls on Sundays. Sometimes he asks about the neighbors, about Miss Georgia May, about the Thursday meetings. He asked once if I had forgiven Brianna. I thought about that for a long time before I answered. I told him forgiveness is something I do for myself, not a report card I hand out to other people. That I hope she finds a way to want things without taking them, that I do not carry her in my chest anymore, not as anger, not as grief, just as a lesson I paid for in 2 years and a flower shelf. He said he understood. I believed him. There is a particular quality to a morning when no one else's need is the first sound in it. When the coffee brews at the time you set, and the cup is where you left it, and the light through the kitchen window is simply light, not something you are watching to see who else enters it. I sit in my chair by the window most evenings now, the one with the cushion worn exactly right, and I watch the street settle into itself. Miss Georgia May waves from her porch. The azalea blooms when it decides to. The neighbors come on Thursdays and leave with phone numbers and a little more certainty than they arrived with. The biscuits are made on Sundays. Everything is exactly as loud or as quiet as I decide. Here is what I want anyone listening to understand, because I did not learn this gently, and I hope you can learn it without the 2 years. The people who love you do not need your signature. They do not need to be on your accounts while you are living and present and capable of managing your own life. Love does not require access. It does not need your name beside its name on a piece of paper to prove itself real. When someone begins to explain why it would be easier, simpler, more practical for you to hand them something that belongs to you, slow down. Ask questions the way a loan officer asks questions. Where is the money going? What is the plan? Show me the numbers. I spent 31 years helping people understand debt before they were buried in it. I spent 2 years not applying a single thing I had learned to my own front door. I am not ashamed of that. I am honest about it. Boundaries are not punishment. They are the difference between a house and a hotel, between family and freeloaders, between love and an arrangement someone else designed. You are allowed to bake biscuits in your own kitchen. You are allowed to have the television at the volume you prefer. You are allowed to sit in your chair, in your house, in the light that belongs to your window, without asking anyone's permission. Take your space back. You are allowed to choose peace. Now I want to hear from you. What is one thing from this story that you recognized from your own life? And which city are you watching from tonight?